Amen. Good morning. You may be seated. If we haven't met, I'm Brad. I'm one of the pastors here on staff. It's a privilege to be able to welcome you this morning. And I would invite you, if you have a Bible with you, to turn to 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy, we just have 2 weeks left in this great letter from the Apostle Paul to his son in the faith, Timothy. And today we begin to wrap it up by looking at a list of names. Now, I know that can sound a little boring, perhaps, but as I was preparing for this week, this might be my most favorite part of this whole letter, all right? I want to give you the big truth of 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 to 12 we're going to be today. Here's the big truth that we take right from this text. It's this: God's mission is carried out through purposeful friendships. The mission of God is not meant to be carried out alone, although you have your personal part in it. The mission of God is meant to be carried out together in purposeful friendships. Relationships were so very vital to the Apostle Paul. If you were to look at the book of Acts, which is a description of the events that happened throughout the early church, you'll see that Paul is always with other people doing ministry. There's a few places that he's alone, like in Athens, but we're actually told that he's just there waiting for someone else to join him. He wants others to be on mission with him. He longs to have friends. He knows that he's not meant to do this life and what God has called him to do on his own. And often when Paul writes a letter, he ends that letter with a list of collaborators or friends, or as Marty prayed this morning, co-workers. And today, Paul gives a list of guys that are particularly important to his life. It's as if Paul is pulling out a missions trip photo and showing us the team photo and then telling you everybody's name and then walking through that. This is a photo of a small group from years past that I have been with, and Mandy and I had the opportunity to lead. Some of the people in that photo you might recognize. If I were to go through this, and I will later, I'll tell you each person by name and how God has grown them. But that's in a sense what Paul is doing. He's saying, here's the people that I have ministered with. These are my friends, and I long to be with them. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9 to 12, Paul, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, writes, "Make every effort to come to me soon, because Demis has deserted me. Since he loved this present world, he's gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you, for he's useful to me in the ministry. I've sent Tychicus to Ephesus." Here's our aim this morning. I know that oftentimes friendship can be hard. Friendship can be difficult. Some of you, it comes really easy and you have lifelong friends. But here's what I want us to pursue this morning, is I want you to be a better friend. And I want to help us determine what kind of friend we are currently. After you determine what kind of friend, the gifts that God has given to you to be that kind of friend, I want us to look at it and say, how can I be a better type of friend in that way? And how can I take the friends that I currently have and think about how can I live on mission with those friends in the world that God has called me to engage? So we're going to look at these friends that Paul lists, and we're going to look at each one of them, how they were different in the life of Paul. The first one is obvious. It's who this letter is written to. It's Timothy. Timothy represents a lifelong friend. My wife Mandy read from Proverbs this morning, and one of those Proverbs says, there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Some immediately run to Jesus with that one, which I think it is, but I don't think we should run to Jesus too quickly on that one. I think you should sit in that and go, there actually are friends that are closer than brothers. There are actual friends that can exist like that in the world, in your life. And Timothy to Paul, and Paul to Timothy had that kind of relationship. A relationship, a friendship that was forged through struggle. Often that's how the best friends are made, aren't they? You go through a struggle together. They became closer and closer. Closer than the greatest dad and the greatest son is the type of relationship they have. Paul calls him, although he's not his son, my true son in the faith. Paul tells Timothy, make every effort to come here soon. If you're a friend, you know that if a true friend you're talking to, you don't feel bad about asking them to sacrifice if they're a true friend, right? Paul says, make every effort to come to me soon. He's not worried about what this friend will think because he knows Timothy will drop everything to be with him. He says with urgency, I need you here now. Get here. I'm going to die. Hurry up. Friendship requires sacrifice, doesn't it? It was going to take Timothy to go from where he was in Ephesus to where Paul was imprisoned in Rome. It would be a 4 to 6 month journey by land and by sea. But Paul has no problem asking that of his friend because it's his true friend. And Timothy has no problem responding to it. He's willing to sacrifice because he wants to be with his friend in his desperate time of need. And if you're going to have a lifelong friend, if you're going to be a great friend, you're going to know that it's going to take sacrifice in order to be one. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be convenient, but to have deep friendships, we have to be willing to sacrifice for one another. But if we're honest with each other, lifetime friends are few and far between. You might have one or two for your whole life, and if you do, you should consider yourself blessed. They take effort. I was sitting on my couch the other day, and it was the Final Four, and I said, Mandy, should I call a friend to come watch it with me? And she's like, yes. And I was like, no, they don't want to do that. I shouldn't call them. They don't want to come over here. She's like, it takes a friend to make a friend, right? And sometimes that's just a simple thing. It's just saying, I need to be willing to be a friend if I want this type of friend. But not everybody's a lifelong friend, and that's okay. Sometimes there's friends for a season. There's friends that you have a great relationship with for a certain period of time, and you can rejoice in that. Sometimes there's friend for a reason. Someone who you're in a project with, you're in a certain mission with for a certain period of time. Those aren't bad things. Not everyone has to be a lifelong friend. So my hope for us this morning is to look and see who are the friends in my sphere right now that are in my life that maybe God has given to me for a lifetime, or perhaps God has given me for a season or a reason, and then say, how can I be the best type of friend to that person? So Timothy is that lifelong friend that's willing to sacrifice, to do whatever it takes, to travel to see his friend Paul, to be with him in his darkest and most hurtful time in his life, facing execution. Timothy drops everything to be by the request of his father in the faith, Paul, and it goes to him. But not all friends are that way. Let's look on at the next friend, Demis. Demis represents the deserting friend. Now, that might sound like a great friend that brings you desserts when you need them, right? But that's not what Paul's referring to here. We see Demis in Colossians chapter 4, verse 14, at the end of this letter, where he's included in faithful laborers with Paul. He says, Luke and the dearly loved physician and Demis sends his greetings. Philemon, or maybe you say Philemon if you're weird. It's written in, this is what it says in verse 24 of that one chapter book. Demis and Luke, my co-workers. These two books, along with the Philippians, were written around the same time. And Luke and Demis were co-workers very closely with Paul. Paul wrote these books under house arrest, and he was sending his greetings that these guys were with him. Demis and Luke were with Paul as he was under house arrest. He's a faithful friend that's around. But then the story changes. As Paul writes in 2 Timothy, he says, Demis, in love with this present world, has deserted me. What happened? We're not 100% sure, But we can guess a little bit at this. Paul is not under house arrest anymore, where people could come in and come out, and it was relatively easy. Paul's now shivering in a hole. He's all alone, and Demis is looking at this and going, that's not how I want to end up. That's not what my life should look like. And he cared more about the cares of the world. I don't know, you can fill that in, whatever the cares look like, making a better life for himself, making a bunch of money, having a more comfortable life. He says, I'm out of here. And Demas deserts Paul and Luke, and he goes to Thessalonica. Perhaps there's nothing more hurtful than to lose a co-laborer that was once faithful. Man, if you've experienced the loss of a friend, I know as a pastor, I've experienced the loss of people that were faithful and were with us and then go. It hurts. It's never easy. And Paul knows that pain on many occasions. And you do too. This first friend is actually a warning, because this could easily be you and me. Don't look over this and go, not me. No, this could easily be you as Demis. Someone that hasn't really counted the cost of following Christ. When it gets really difficult, you say, I didn't sign up for this, I'm out. And the pull of the world can easily just slowly and gradually pull you away from the things of God and into things that seem a little more comfortable. And so I would just challenge you that, as you've seen throughout this whole letter, following Christ is not always easy. But what you lose pales in comparison to what you gain in following Christ. And so the world temporarily looks better at times, but sticking with Jesus and sticking with those that want to follow him is so rewarding and so outweighs the cost. So if you're here and you know in your heart that you're in the place of Demis, like you're living in that tension right now, consider the beauty of Jesus and stay with him. Let's look at this next friend. Crescens, I think that's how you say it. I'm not exactly sure. It says he's gone to Galatia. And that's all we know about him. So I'm not going to expand any further on him because it would be just guessing, all right? But just know that Crescens seems like a good dude, all right? Let's go on to the next one. Titus. Titus is the troubleshooting friend. 2 Corinthians and Titus 1:5, unlike Crescens, there is much written about Titus. But I want to just draw your attention to two things about him and two passages that you can see why he's a troubleshooting friend. He's always the one that comes in, gives an assessment, and then offers help. 2 Corinthians 7 verse 6 says, but God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the arrival of Titus. That's beautiful, isn't it? Wouldn't you love to have that said about you? God, who comforts the downcast, comfort us by the arrival of Titus. What a true and wonderful friend. You see in this text that sometimes the best troubleshooting you can do is just be a present friend. Can it be? Titus knew that in this moment he just needed to come and be quiet. And that's the best thing that he could do. And he's compared to the same type of comfort that comes from God as the same kind of comfort that you can give to a friend. That's beautiful, isn't it? Titus 1:5, the book of Titus, Paul says this, the reason I left you in Crete was to set right what was left undone as I directed you, and to appoint elders in every town. Titus was sent to the island of Crete, and if you've read the book of Titus before, you would know that Crete is an absolute mess. And Paul sends Titus there. He says, get processes in order. Bring order to the churches that are there. And while you're there, help them grow into what it looks like to actually function as a God-honoring church. He was a troubleshooter. He saw the chaos and then brought order to it. He was trustworthy. Paul could say, I know that I'm going to send you there, and I don't have to hold your hand the whole time. You're going to take care of it. That's the type of friend that Titus was. Maybe you build things up. Maybe you are the type of person that sees a situation and says, I know exactly how to fix this thing. That is such a helpful and faithful friend that you can be in the life of someone else. I had a friend that came over one time and it was raining and he was looking up at my gutters and the water was spilling out of the gutters over the top. And he walks in and he says, "Brad, I'm embarrassed to be your friend right now." I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Your gutters are so clogged the water doesn't even go down the spouts." And he waited until the rain stopped and he got out my ladder and he got up on the roof and pulled all the crud that was in my gutters out and put it in a bucket. And he says, "Now everything's going to flow freely. You're welcome," right? He's just a troubleshooting friend. He sees a problem and then takes the initiative to say, "I'm going to bring order to this absolute chaos." Our next friend is Paul's Doc Holliday. His name is Luke. He's the faithful friend. Colossians 4, verse 14, the first part of it, we've already looked at this, but it says, "Luke, the dearly loved physician." Luke was with Paul at the time. He's the only one that's still with him. He's probably dictating this letter from Paul. And I'd like to think, as Brian Chappell says, that he was actually maybe helping Paul with some of his analogies as a physician. Paul's talking about teaching, spreading, and it's bad for you. And he's like, "What can I think of that would be like a good analogy for that?" And Luke's like, "How about gangrene?" Paul's like, "I like that. It's really good." Not only was he faithful, but he also wrote more of the New Testament than Paul did. Did you know that? Paul wrote more letters, but Luke actually wrote more of our New Testament. He's responsible for the books Luke and Acts, which actually were probably all one book. If you actually read them together, you see that they just flow right into each other. But it was such a long book, it couldn't be contained on one scroll. So it had to be written in two different scrolls. And so here is Luke, and he's written the book of Luke as a historian, and also he's written the book of Acts as a historian and also an eyewitness. Here's one of the ways you know that Luke was a faithful friend. If you were to read the book of Acts, you'd see in Acts chapter 16 that the language changes from they to we. When it changes from they to we, Luke is now saying, "I was there. I experienced it. I was with Paul and the others when this happens." So if you look at Acts 28, verse 1, it says, "Once safely ashore, we then learned that the island was called Malta." So here's how faithful Luke was. He was with Paul as a prisoner on a ship, and they were shipwrecked, and they float on some boards up to an island they didn't know called Malta. Luke was there experiencing everything with Paul. Luke was with Paul, attending to his needs, taking care of his wounds that Paul would experience and get many of as a physician. And Paul is gratefully saying, "Luke is still with me." Are you a faithful friend? That's what we can learn from this. That you're there. That you walk through life with others. You've experienced the power of a faithful friend. Are you that type of friend yourself? And when we look at Luke, we see that he was this type of friend to Paul that all of us should admire and be looking towards as an example. Verse 11, if you look down at that, it says, "Bring Mark with you, for he is useful to me in the ministry." Mark, this morning we call the second chance friend. Mark is a second chance friend. He had a really cool opportunity, as you can see in Acts 12, 11, and 12. You see behind me, when Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's grasp and from all the Jewish people expected." As soon as he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who's called Mark, where many had assembled and were praying. So Mark's mom probably came to know Christ at Pentecost, and then her house was one of the places that the early church met in Jerusalem. In fact, it was the house that Peter went to after he was released from prison by an angel. He goes there to Mark's house. Pretty cool. What an opportunity this guy has. The first missionary journey, Paul and Barnabas are down in the city of Antioch, and they're praying together, and the Holy Spirit says, set apart Paul and Barnabas for ministry. And so what they do is this church lays hands on Paul and Barnabas, and they send them out on a missionary journey to tell the known world about the good news of Jesus. And they take Mark with them. And he's with them on this awesome missionary journey. But here's what happens in Acts chapter 15. You'll see it on the screen behind me. And some time had passed. Paul said to Barnabas, let's go back and visit the brothers and sisters in every town where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing. Barnabas wanted to take along John, who was called Mark. But Paul insisted that they should not take along this man who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not gone on with them to the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company, and Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed off to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed after being commended by the brothers and sisters to the grace of the Lord. So here's a very big moment. Paul and Barnabas that were on this mission together were going to go out and visit the churches that had been established. And Barnabas, who's the cousin of John's, or the cousin of Mark, says, I want to take Mark. And Paul's like, no way. We are not taking Mark. And they're like, why? He's like, he deserted us on the first mission. Now, I don't know. We don't know exactly what happened. Perhaps the persecution was too strong. Perhaps he was afraid of what was going on. But at some point in the mission, the first time, Mark goes away and deserts them. And Paul has no stomach for deserters. And he's like, no, there is no way that we are taking Mark along with us. We don't need him. He's useless. But then time passes. And Mark, who was once useless, has now become useful. And Paul says, Timothy, when you're on your way here, grab Mark and bring him with you, because I could really use him in ministry. This beautiful friend who now has a second chance to be faithful. I love what Groeschel says. He says, failure might disqualify you for a season, but it might qualify you for the next season. Listen, you might be sidelined for a season because you've done something that disqualified you, but you're not out forever. Listen, friend, God is a God of second chances. And you might be able to be the one that says, to tell the story saying, I screwed up, I disqualified myself, but not forever. God is now using that and is qualifying me to do even better things than I could before. Because I've experienced the grace of God, I've experienced the being unfaithful, and now I'm faithful, and I want to share that with you. And Paul says, that's the kind of guy I want. Who owns up to his mistakes, knows when he was wrong, but then remedies it by being faithful over time. That's the type of friend that Paul had and who he wanted to have around him. Look down at verse 12. We'll see this last friend. I have sent Tychicus to Ephesus. Tychicus is the serving friend. Colossians 4, we see this about Tychicus. Our dearly loved brother. You think Paul likes Tychicus? I think so. Our dearly loved brother, faithful minister and fellow servant in the Lord, will tell you all the news about me. Whoa, what a description. One that we should all aspire to be that kind of friend. Everybody just loved Tychicus. I think when they saw him, they were like, they shortened his name up to Ticky. That's just what I think in my mind. Right? And when they saw him, they were like, Ticky! What a good dude. Like they all just loved Ticky, right? Because he was dearly loved, a faithful minister, and a fellow servant of the Lord. Paul mentioned that at the book of Colossians that I just read at the very end. He'll tell you the news about me. So what he's saying is, Tychicus, Ticky, he's with me now. Ticky's going to show up to you in just a few moments. So here's what happened. Tychicus was probably the one who delivered the letters of Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. He delivered them to the churches. He was a reliever. He wasn't a teacher. Not anything about him being an awesome leader. but he was one that Paul could count on to faithfully serve. Whatever Paul needed, Tychicus was willing to do. I texted a friend the other day and I had a problem. And I said, hey, can you help with this? He says, I'm in. That's the kind of guy he was. Whatever needed to happen. He was the guy that was setting up and tearing down at church and the last one to leave. And throughout the church, he's looking for people to find a seat. He's saying, how can I help? What can I do? I'm available. I just want to serve the Lord with everything that I have. That's how God has gifted me. And I want to know you. Whatever you need, friend, I'm here for you. Titus 3, verse 12 says, when Artemis or Tychicus, I will send Artemis or Tychicus to you. Make every effort to come to me to Nicopolis, because I have decided to spend the winter here. Tychicus was one of the two guys that was going to relieve Titus in Crete, so that Titus could go and could troubleshoot elsewhere. And now Paul is writing to Timothy here. He says, Tychicus, I sent him to Ephesus. Where is Paul? Where is Timothy? Where is he the pastor right now? Starts with Ephesus and ends in sus. Ephesus, right? So what does he say? Tychicus coming to you. He's going to relieve you so that you can come to me in Rome. That's the kind of guy he is. He's going to take over and he's going to serve and he's going to do whatever it takes. Tychicus was such a good dude. Listen, God's mission is carried out through purposeful friendships. The mission of God is not meant to be done alone, but with everybody, all of us together. And let me just say this, the best friends that I've ever had in my life are people that I have served with in ministry. Like, if you're looking and saying, where do I look for friends? It's people who want to live on mission for God and serve him with their lives. It's the best way to have friends. In it together, working together. This small group that I talked about earlier, most of these people were friends for a season, but they were friends that I hold dear. Madison up there in the top, she's now a mom, has a great husband, and she left our group that we had and went to be a part of a core team at a Salt Church at a campus town. The next two down here were high school sweethearts, and I ended up doing their wedding. And he's a cop in Ankeny, and they're faithful servants in their church, and she's a youth leader. Jacob and Autumn, you might recognize them. They're people here at this church. Often Jacob's on the camera. Faithful servants of the Lord. They were just dating when they came into our group. And we were just like, well, what is going on here? What's happening? Autumn's dating this guy, and we got to know him. And then we all got to go to their wedding. Mike and Steph there. Steph is the children's director at a church plant in Ankeny. Let's do a couple more here. Dylan and Brielle, the guy in the blue shirt up there. I led Dylan to Christ at a Caribou in Ankeny when he was in high school, or a Caribou in Waukee when he was in high school. And his wife, Brielle, they've now got a couple kids, and they're serving faithfully in ministry in Waukee. It was halfway through the year, and the pastor that was over the small groups at the time said to me, we're going to add people to your group. And I was like, I don't want to add anyone to my group. Our group is going really good, and it's quite large. And they said, no, you're going to get people anyway. I was like, fine, we'll take them. And that was Marty and Maddie Demeritt. Now, pastor, pillars in our church of sorts. Nowhere near ready to be a pastor at that time. Oh my goodness. I was like, dude, this guy's a mess. But look at him now. Still a mess, but loving the Lord, right? No, much less than he used to be. But man, I tell you what, I don't see half these people anymore. But they were such good friends because we were on mission together. And I rejoice at how God is using them. And I was so happy that Mandy and I got to be a part of this stage of their lives along with them. So here is Paul. He's awaiting his trial. It's going to drag out a few more months. And he says, Timothy, I want you here. I want you here before I die. I want to spend time with you again. And in 4 to 6 months, Timothy would be with him. Mark would be with him. And Luke was already with him. And they're all going to be together. And I used AI to create maybe what their selfie would look like. Isn't that great? Can you imagine the tears that were shed, the songs that were sung, the memories that were shared as they're all together with Paul hanging out? And then I made one more just for fun. I added a guy in there. I don't know. It just felt right. Let's learn to live together, shall we? I just want to ask a couple of questions of you this morning. Which friend are you? Where has God naturally gifted you? I'm not asking you to be someone that you're not. I'm asking you to say, where has God gifted me? And then how can I be better in that way? Right? Are you Demis, the deserter? Like, you're not around when people need you? Get better. Are you Titus, the troubleshooting friend that can assess a situation and then just help out and make it better? Get better at that. Are you Luke, the faithful? Be even more faithful. You're Mark, the second chancer? Be more faithful. Tell people about your story. Offer them into that kind of friendship with you. And are you Tychicus, the servant? The one that just loves to serve. Listen, do better at what you do best. All right? Be you, how God has designed you, and be a great friend on mission together. And see your friendships. Maybe just take those friends that are in your sphere and say, how do we leverage our lives for the sake of Christ and his kingdom right now? What can we do to further the cause of Jesus, being friends together? And then lastly, how can you grow closer to your friend Jesus? John 15, verse 13 and 14, Jesus says, no greater love has anyone than this, than to lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I commanded you. Jesus is the model of the perfect friend who sacrificed to the end his own very life so that we could be friends of God. John 15:15, he says, I've called you friends. This is Jesus talking here. I've called you friends because I have made known to you everything I've heard from my Father. What's Jesus saying here? I'm calling you on mission as my co-laborer, as a friend. That's the kind of relationship you have with me. Join me on mission, the perfect friend. And as you live your life, draw near to this friend, Jesus.